Happy April Fool's Day. You might think this week's column is a joke since I'm writing about my experience leaving Duluth, flying 1,600 miles away, only to get on a boat and then go ice skating on the boat. But no, this all actually happened. I wrote about what I learned on my first cruise vacation. When I booked my first cruise vacation, I wasn't sure what to expect. Then came a point around noon Friday just outside the Cabo San Lucas cruise port when I found myself standing on a helipad, drinking a very dry martini and watching for whales. Well, I thought, I guess I should have expected something sort of like this. My family members, who had some prior cruise experience, decided to hop on Royal Caribbean's Navigator of the Seas. Only Big Fancy Boat could possibly be a more generic cruise ship name. For a 5-night spring break getaway departing Los Angeles for 2 ports in Mexico. Having long been curious about cruises, I eagerly joined the party. This resulted in the paradoxical scenario of traveling far away from Duluth to get on a boat and then go ice skating. Yes, on the boat. I discovered that on a cruise ship skating rink, even an uncoordinated Northlander will feel like Neil Broughton. "This is so scary," said one young girl as she joined the wobbly group of passengers skating out onto the ship's ice rink. We all had to sign copies of a 2-page liability waiver, and helmets were absolutely mandatory. Among the uniformly placid crew members, the only one who seemed the slightest bit harried was the person distributing skating equipment. The level of service was beyond anything I thought I'd ever experience in my lifetime. At home in Duluth, with its tourist economy and labor shortages, I don't take a single espresso pull for granted. On the Navigator of the Seas, I couldn't escape the international staff's smiling service even if I wanted to. I hadn't bought the internet package and started to have the feeling that if I could Google cruise ship crew compensation, I might learn some uncomfortable truths about the power of the U.S. tourist dollar. On the boat, every staffer remembered my name, my drink orders, and the fact that I was drafted into the onboard game show, offering the stage name Sieur Duluth. No one got the reference, but I did hear a couple scattered cheers when I said I was from Duluth during an open question and answer session with the ship's captain. "I've been there," said Captain James Nazar, a Canadian who helmed Great Lakes freighters before upgrading to cruise ships. Yes, that career move was an upgrade, even more so than you might think. When I asked the captain about it during the question and answer session, he said, "The living conditions here are significantly different compared to a cargo ship. You can't even compare." Among the things that Nassar said he doesn't miss, being covered in coal dust when we would carry coal because it would get into the ventilation. You go to bed, you wake up, everything is that black color. At 1,021 feet, the Navigator of the Seas is about as long as the biggest ships that visit Duluth. It's much taller, though. With the funnel reaching 208 feet above the waterline, the ship would hit the aerial lift bridge like a double-decker bus meeting a chain-link fence. There are now dozens of larger cruise ships, but the $600 million vessel is an impressive sight, and when it's on a voyage, there's a lot at stake in terms of both infrastructure and human life. Nazar said, "The bridge operation on these cruise ships is so much more intense. On cargo ships, like the freighters in Duluth, you're the officer of the watch, you're the lone person up there making those decisions, and of course, reporting to the captain. There's so much more structure here to ensure the safety of the vessel." Nazar explained, "When we were coming in and out of ports, on cargo ships, for example, we just went, and that was it. Somebody might tell you where your mooring lines would go. Here, on a cruise ship, 30 minutes before we get to the pilot station for a port, a full team briefing. What's happening? What's going on? Everything is planned out ahead of time." It is, of course, true that even cruises don't always go entirely according to plan. The infamous COVID cruise was a touch point during onboard conversations, as was the White Star Line ship that our trivia host yelled at passengers for even mentioning. Joking aside, there was, in point of fact, a photo opportunity with a backdrop depicting the grand staircase on board the Titanic. On the tip of the bow one morning, one passenger said to her partner, "Jack, I'll never let go, Jack." "Stop being corny," grunted the man, wearing Crocs and clutching a Royal Caribbean souvenir cup as he squinted out at the ocean. I'd been told that people watching was a prime activity on cruise ships. I was glad for that since my stateroom was a promenade view accommodation. I opened my curtains each morning to see an indoor mall with the bamboo rooms, thatched palm entryway, a stairway down to the Casino Royale, and the glass facade of a hair care bar called to dry for. Every morning at 9, a crew member stood on a bridge above the mall corridor to lead a sort of Zumba class. "Why do they have to do this here?" asked a frustrated senior, dodging waving arms as she angled for a latte at the cafe promenade one morning. There were certainly plenty of people to watch, just shy of 4,000 of them, but as a general rule, their apparel and comportment were far more restrained than that of an average attendee at, say, the Minnesota State Fair. "If you're drinking," a Star Lounge bartender asked me with a grin, "who's steering the ship?" I couldn't believe I was the only passenger who brought a novelty captain's hat. Even printed t-shirts were relatively scarce, although some of my fellow screen print-loving Gen Xers duly represented for the Millennium Falcon, the Beastie Boys, and, quote, coffee till cocktails. For these passengers, cruising was no joke. It was a serious occupation. Everybody seemed to know more than me about where to find food. My family pointed me to a vast buffet I hadn't guessed at, given that there was also an ornate multi-level dining room. Drinks. Cruising turned out to be not entirely dissimilar to a Mall of America bar crawl. And recreation. In addition to ice skating and the unexpectedly interactive game show, I took in some shuffleboard, which is kind of like curling at sea, observed one of my fellow Minnesotans, and a game of beverage bingo that a family member printed out for us. My winning bingo row included a generously poured Long Island iced tea, but I prefer to blame the motion of the ocean for the fact that I fell flat on my face while scurrying back to my team during one of the game show challenges. There was an upcharge for any internet use outside of the cruise line app, so I decided to go web-free for the longest period in my adult life. 5 days. As I write this, on Sunday, March 26th, I have absolutely no idea whether Donald Trump's been indicted or where Duluth currently stands in the snowiest winter record books or where any of my friends were the last time a Be Real notification went off. I've never felt particularly burdened by the constant connectivity of contemporary life, but the fact that my smartphone went silent certainly added to the sense of utter dislocation I experienced at sea. With nothing more to do than decide which impulse to gratify at any given moment, the cruise turned out to be the most intense dose of sheer, unadulterated leisure I've ever experienced. After a few days, the pure indolence got downright awkward. For Minnesotans used to lake cabin vacations where there's always firewood to gather or a broken board to repair on the dock, cruise life takes some getting used to. My fellow passengers included a family from Minneapolis with a child who may have felt the need to contribute some entertainment for the general good. He hopped up at the piano bar and regaled us with a theme from Super Mario Bros. 3. My TikTok feed, that is, if the app wasn't banned while I've been offline, is full of influencers on vacations like this. And I have a new appreciation for how exhausting it must be to constantly create content while ostensibly enjoying a carefree escape. Until now, I hadn't really reflected on how much of my attention routinely goes to sharing my activities online, then checking to see who reacted to what I'm doing and typing pithy responses to their comments. It's been an eye-opener to learn just how optional all that social media interaction actually is. What would people say if I posted a photo of the Mexican coastline? Who cares? They have their own lives to worry about. All I really needed to know on the cruise ship was the time and day. The latter was conveyed via carpet inserts on the elevators, marking each day with the deadpan punch of on-screen titles in a horror movie. On the first morning, "Thursday," said the elevator carpet. I woke up due to jet lag at 5 a.m. With no Instagram to scroll through, no emails to check, I reached for my book and then realized I was on a cruise with the sun about to rise. I found the deck almost empty, populated only by a few crew members adjusting chairs and some absurdly dedicated joggers doing laps around the pool. The ship throbbed with the efforts of 4 engines. The captain would later bring a 5th online to punch it against the waves once we turned north from Cabo, and said at that point we were burning tons of fuel every hour. Cruising is decidedly not a carbon-neutral activity, one of a range of ethical considerations with which I might have troubled myself if the sun wasn't breaking the horizon with such majesty I could practically hear the timpani thumping. A few days later, I was back on the deck, sitting in one of several hot tubs as the skyscraper-sized ship cut through the waves. A whipping wind had chased most passengers below deck, and the shade sail was cracking with such ferocity that my Apple Watch kept alerting me to dangerous noise levels. I dismissed the alerts and sank into the bubbling tub. Pitbull's Fireball was bumping, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. One guest who had sprung for the Wi-Fi passage and called a contact on FaceTime called, "Happy birthday! Where are you? We're on a boat!" That was my experience on my first ever cruise vacation. Digital producer Dan Williamson just asked, would I do it again? Would I take a cruise again? And the answer is, oh yeah. I don't think a cruise could ever be the only kind of vacation I would ever take. I mean, I couldn't imagine not getting back to New Orleans or New York or Bemidji. But yeah, definitely would cruise again. Maybe next time a Disney cruise. We'll see. Well, that's it for this week's column. Next week, I'll have some thoughts to share on Duluth, the supposed climate refuge city. Until then, I'm Jay Gabler, Duluth News Tribune.